Welcome to this NR Times live event. And today we're focusing on the future of neuro rehab. I'm really pleased to be able to say our sponsors today are QEF, and we'll hear a little bit more from QEF in just a few minutes. So over the next 2 hours or so, we're going to be speaking to a group of experts who I'm really pleased to say have agreed to share their insight and their experience with us over 4 particular discussions and themes. We'll be focusing on the challenges, but particularly the opportunities facing the neuro rehab community and how we shape the future together to ensure that we continue to develop even better outcomes for that neuro rehab community. But firstly, I'd just like to introduce our sponsors, and we'll hear a few words from QEF now.
QEF's range of expert services enable disabled people to be as independent as possible. Our services can have a life-changing impact which ripples through the lives of the people we support. At QEF's Care and Rehabilitation Centre, we provide expert therapy and care to people who've suffered a stroke, acquired brain injury, spinal injury or neurological illness.
At the Care and Rehabilitation Centre at QEF, we help people to reach their goals, to be more independent and to return home if they can. Rocky came to us after his stroke and he was unable to walk. He needed assistance of one person and equipment for transferring between wheelchair and the chair or the bed.
I'm extremely grateful to QEF. It's an amazing team that gave me the skills and training to walk.
The best thing about my job is for patients to reach their goals, to being independent again and return their home and return to their hobbies, return to their loved ones.
The fact that I'm back home now with my family is amazing. The only way I can describe it is basically, in one sense, you find in life that you almost have to sometimes lose something in life to gain. I couldn't give you any more greater reward than life.
The team at QEF's Care and Rehabilitation Centre in Surrey are delighted to be sponsoring the NR Times Live 2025. There are some very interesting talks lined up this afternoon. My name is Ellie Kearney, lead physiotherapist.
And my name is Mark Jiggins, senior occupational therapist. We are therapists at the QEF Specialist Neuro Rehabilitation Centre, providing intensive and slow stream neuro rehabilitation, complex neurological care and disability management for adults across the south of England.
Our in-house multidisciplinary team support people to regain core skills after acquired brain injury, stroke and spinal injury so that they can be as independent as possible.
We also support long-term neurological conditions to optimise a person's potential, such as multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's disease and Guillain-Barré syndrome.
We provide person-centred therapy and care, and almost 70% of our clients are able to return home with a package of care.
After discharge, our clients also benefit from a free mobility or driving assessment through the QEF Mobility Services, which is a key part of supporting independence. We hope you enjoy the event this afternoon and find it thought-provoking.
Well, thank you to Ellie and Mark, and thanks once again to QEF. It's great to see their work in action there. So just a little bit about the format today. As I mentioned, we've got 4 separate discussions, but all with that golden thread running through them: the future of neuro rehab and the opportunities for improving care and introducing new approaches and better outcomes. If you've got questions for any of our panelists, put them in the Q&A. And time allowing, each session will be about 20-25 minutes. We'll try and fit in some of those questions. If we don't get to them all, we'll make sure that the panelists and experts that are speaking today we'll get copies of the questions, and we'll do our best to try and make sure that responses from our panelists are up on the NR Times website. So, without further ado, let's move on to our first speaker. I'd like to introduce Miriam Duffy, who's Director of the National Rehab Centre. Welcome, Miriam, and I'm going to ask you, Miriam, to kick things off by maybe just saying a little bit about yourself, your role at the NRC, and your areas of particular focus and interest.
Thank you, Alastair, and afternoon, everybody. It's an absolute privilege to be here. So yes, I'm the director of the National Rehabilitation Centre. I'm a physiotherapist by profession, and I specialised in treating people with predominantly traumatic brain injury, but in that wider context of neuro rehabilitation for very many years. And back in 2012, I was then lucky enough to be involved in the major trauma service setup. So I'm based in the acute hospital in Nottingham, so was involved in setting up that regional service, but also on a national level in terms of the rehabilitation prescription, and was a member of that working group. And it was a real drive at that time to try and increase the profile of rehabilitation, what the service can offer to people, how important it is, which obviously we all understand, but it's not still that level of understanding in the wider population. And that was the start of a long journey from that point to here, because at the same time, there was an overarching programme of work called the Defence and National Rehabilitation Centre programme, which also started. And a big driver for that was the Olympic Games in 2012, and a recognition at that time that we probably didn't have an adequate response to any major incident that happened during that time. So that kickstarted the major trauma process, but that highlighted the really significant capacity gaps that we do have, and we still have, as again, we all understand across the country in neuro rehabilitation. So I was just in the right place at the right time, in all honesty, Alastair, to be part of the National Rehabilitation Centre programme of work. That defence piece of work is a legacy from the 6th Duke of Westminster, who was a reservist for 40 years and wanted to leave something significant. And the rehabilitation campus that was chosen is in the East Midlands, obviously where I'm based. And the two centres, the Defence Centre and the National Centre for NHS patients, are co-located within 400 metres of each other, but situated on a purpose-built rehabilitation campus, which is in 300 acres of very beautiful parkland. So that was very lucky for me, and I have directed that programme of work ever since. In terms of where we are with the NRC and the priorities around that, first and foremost, it's about transformation and driving those high standards of rehabilitation across the country, learning around best practice from other places in the world. And we've done a lot of benchmarking and a lot of research around that. Sadly, mostly during COVID, so we weren't actually able to get on a plane and go out and about, but nevertheless, we spoke to a huge number of people. And understanding that actually when people enter rehabilitation in this country, they get a great service, but there's a huge number of people who don't ever access a rehabilitation bed. So we're looking at the very acute phase of rehabilitation, people coming straight out of acute beds. We're not at the moment influencing community services, although we are hoping to get people into better outcomes for entering into those community services. And everywhere you look at this, it makes sense, doesn't it? So the economic value to rehabilitation is enormous, and we're building a building, so we've had to go through a capital business case process with the government, and economics is very important in that, and it's very important to demonstrate it anyway. But the average cost of a rehab spell in this country is £39,000, which is pretty good value for money, I would say. And that saves over £500,000 on every person's lifetime on ongoing health and social care costs that they then won't need. So that's investment that I think is very important to make. And through the NRC, we are providing a service which takes people very early in their recovery journey. So we have put a very strong medical model around that patient so that we can focus on rehabilitation very early, but in a very safe way. We're not situated on an acute campus, so that's given more impetus into that medical presence. But it also helps to drive the understanding in the medical specialties around rehabilitation, the importance of that. And we've done a lot of work in that way in terms of education. And we are also really thinking about how we can provide a very intensive and very varied day on that campus, given that we have got fantastic facilities. And I should say that the Defence Centre that is situated just next door has good facilities that we are able to physically share, but the idea is that we share those expertise across those two campuses as well. And for the first time ever in rehabilitation, bringing those two services together. We're very technology enabled in the new building as well, and it's a real opportunity, isn't it, when you build a new premises to be able to digitally enable as much as possible. So we will be the first net zero carbon NHS operational building. We will have some robotics in there and neurophysiology, and really want to encourage people to come and be innovative, to develop new products with us. We have academic partners, and we're already developing some international collaborations around the field of rehabilitation. So the NRC is in three parts. It's the National Hub for a New Clinical Model for Rehabilitation, it's the National Hub for Research and Innovation, and it's the National Training and Education Centre, all around the for NHS. So I'm happy to stop there, Alastair, and take any questions that might have come through around NRC and what we're trying to do.
That's great, Miriam. Thank you for that. And I think you've been very modest about being in the right place at the right time. But a couple of questions that I've seen come in there. You talked a little bit about innovation and academic and industry partnerships. Could you say a little bit more about new pathways and models being developed and the role that innovation and new approaches plays in the NRC?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think when any of us talk to partners and potential partners in industry, they find it very difficult to break into the NHS in many respects in terms of the regulatory framework around that, and it's almost too much of a barrier even to get started. So we hope to be an enabler in that respect, to work alongside people from industry and companies who are interested in developing a new product or a new piece of technology, maybe a new application, to facilitate the process of rehabilitation. And we have space dedicated in the NRC building to do exactly that. And we will offer the opportunity to work with our clinical staff, to work alongside patients where appropriate, and also with our academic colleagues in order to research, to try and test those products out. And really the aim of that is to develop products which are suitable right from the inception, and to try and minimize that embryonic development stage and people going down the wrong path, but also to speed up that whole cycle to try and get new products out into the market, which would be of benefit to that wider population.
And I assume that research is going to play quite a key part in that in terms of your academic partnerships, if not your industry partnerships.
Indeed. So research is a big driver for us and a really important part of where we are hoping to make a significant impact. So there are really good pieces of research going on, both in the UK and around the world. We are embarking on a programme of work to involve those partners, both nationally and internationally, and develop again, an enabling framework and some flagship research programmes over the next 2 to 5 years, really focusing on where we see those gaps and identifying where research could have the most significant impact. And at the moment, I see that all around the field of technology. Actually, there's new technologies emerging all the time, which are incredibly exciting, not only as an adjunct to what a therapist can achieve, but also enabling people to be much more independent when they leave a rehabilitation setting, go home, so that they almost become part of their daily lives. And if we can integrate those technologies as much as possible within the rehabilitation process, then so much the better. They're more likely to be adopted. So research around all of that is increasingly important. Research around the economics of this is also really important. So, joining up areas of work and focus around what is the impact of getting somebody back to work, for example? What is the impact of enabling that person to become part of their previous social activities around their community, part of their uh, purpose and desire for life again? How does that impact positively, not only on them and their family, but also economically, because that will be a huge determinant of how we can invest further in rehabilitation.
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk about the economic impact as well as the social and the personal impact as well, Miriam. I guess as legislators look at this, and those involved with legislation, you have to ask about education and awareness. And is that part of your role as well, to raise the profile of neuro rehab and to convince those people that will be responsible ultimately for the kind of investment that some of the things you describe need, to educate them and wider communities about the importance of neuro rehab and the impact of some of these new approaches?
Absolutely. And we feel a huge amount of responsibility for that. And I think everybody on the panel today would also be wanting to raise the profile of the impact of neuro rehabilitation. It is a really cost-effective service at the end of the day, and so very important, as you say, not only for that individual, but also for their family, their carers, their supporters. It will enable that wider group of people to get back to previous activity and, in some cases, not have to give up work to care for a loved one. And it's in terms of government investment, there's a lot of competing priorities, even within the healthcare space, isn't there? And the more understanding we have economically of how we are positively impacting, because this is a positive impact story, it's not a drain on resources at all, then the more likely people are to start understanding that. And of course, the time is right, isn't it, with the drive and agendas around returning people to work? How can we impact on that? Where I don't think we really understand at the moment how much we can positively impact people back into that workplace, because the offer is fairly minimal at the moment.
And just maybe as we move towards talking about widening access and how you reach out to new patients and new groups, is education and awareness a wider issue amongst some of those affected in the neuro rehab communities, their families, their friends? Is that something that the NRC can contribute to in that dialogue?
Yes, no, absolutely. So we're already in touch with a lot of charities around that and how we can support that education piece, how we can develop awareness and supported conversations. So one of our big pieces of work at the moment is looking at how we support families and carers to have constructive conversations with their family member who's been through and going through a rehabilitation process for whatever reason, and how we help them understand any red flags that might be linked into that conversation, how we then enable them to signpost people or to come back to us. But that wider piece of education is so important, isn't it? Because my feeling is largely, unless you've had personal experience of rehabilitation or you're working in the field, people are generally pretty unaware of what we do and the positive impact that rehabilitation can have and does have every day in people's lives. So when people are making decisions around investment and other things, it's really important that they understand that.
Obviously, you're working with the NHS, with private sector groups, and a range of groups from other sectors potentially. As I've been speaking to people in the neuro rehab community, this issue of having to have an integrated care plan and service keeps coming up. Do you have a role in providing an effective bridge to continue to improve integration between private and public sector services for the neuro rehab community, Miriam?
I think everybody does. I think, increasingly we can't work in isolation and we shouldn't work in isolation. People will draw on a number of different services to enable their lifestyle and recovery. And I think it's really important that we learn from each other, we talk to each other, we're aware of what work is going on and um, the ability to maximize the opportunity around that person by doing that rather than working in isolation. So yes, and the rehabilitation at this early stage that we're involved in will hopefully have a positive ripple effect out to all of those other providers around more community services. And we can't not have that conversation, I think.
It seems from what you've said that the NRC is having and will continue to have a transformational impact. It'd be interesting to hear you talk about maybe your hopes for the future and the hopes that people in the neuro rehab community that come into contact with the NRC might have for the future. Can you talk a little bit about how you see the future developing and what kind of expectations and optimism should people have based on the work that you're doing?
Yep, of course. I mean, my hope for the future is a very simple one, that everybody who needs rehabilitation has access to rehabilitation, and we know that we're a long way from that at the moment. The WHO figures in their 2030 campaign suggest that only 40% of people have access to rehabilitation across Europe who needs it, and I think it's the same in this country. So by enabling people to access services early and by enabling people to understand the need for those services, then I'm hoping that, and the onus really on us is to demonstrate that this new way of working works, and then we can expand that out across other regions in the country so that access is easier for people.
I've got a couple of questions for people watching, if that's okay, Miriam. A short one firstly, just a couple. Which patients will have access to your facilities? Just those that are in the local area? Question mark.
So the National Rehab Centre is the national hub for the new clinical model. So that's based in the East Midlands. And whilst people can access the service from anywhere in the country, this is really the driver for a regional model, understanding that people do need to be close to home to access rehabilitation. And once we've proved the concept of doing things differently, the ambition then is to roll that new model out across the rest of the country. But just as people can, at the moment, people can be referred in from anywhere.
Great, thanks for that. And maybe one final question from those watching. Will the centre be adopting best practice on user-centred design for new and existing technology involving people with neuro rehab needs from the outset of the R&D process? That would be great to see.
Yes, short answer, yes, because we've already done the design of the building. That's been happening over the last few years. And yes, people have been involved from all different areas, so patients included. And we've had some great ideas that have come through in that route. In terms of designing R&D, people will be consented to be part of a research study when they come to the NRC. And we're developing a new data set for rehabilitation at the NRC so that we're hoping to get some better data around what we're doing and the impact. And we have a very strong PPIE group who are helping us in the work to design that research program of work that I was talking about earlier.
Fantastic. Miriam, thank you very much for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
You've created time in a very busy day to respond to our questions and to give us some insight into the NRC. I think all of us will be inspired by some of the work that you're doing and the expectations of the work to come in the future. I hope if we can send you any other questions that come in, and there's a few more just coming in as I speak, then maybe you'll have the chance to respond to those and we'll put them up on the NR Times site. So on behalf of NR Times and their sponsors QEF, can I just say a big thank you, Miriam, for joining us?
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
And for our next discussion, I'm really pleased to be able to welcome Michelle Coudhale, who's the Clinical Director at Resilience Neurospecialists, and Chris Morden from Ectron and Resilience. So again, as I did with Miriam, Michelle and Chris, if I can come to you firstly, Michelle, and maybe you could just say a few words by way of introduction about yourself, your organisation and your areas of focus, and then I'll come to Chris to do the same. Michelle.
Of course, thank you very much, and thank you to NR Times for, I guess, to be involved in this session. So I'm a neuro by background with over 30 years of experience. I'm not going to tell you how many, but within the NHS and the independent sector, particular areas of interest are in gait analysis, mood analysis, balance rehabilitation, and spastic management as well. As I worked in both the NHS and independent sector, so an expert witness with a specialism of neuro, and also provide training, postgraduate training as well in various countries. And more recently in the development of resilience neuro rehab with Chris and some other colleagues, in order to be able to bring together our range of experiences in order to try and provide the most effective, provide best outcomes for people within sort of a community-based and rehabilitation setting. That's me in a nutshell. I'll let Chris introduce himself.
Chris, thank you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be with you. So about 16 years ago, myself and business partner Alex Jones became distribution partners with Tyromotion, Austrian company that at the time was a startup entering the robotics field with a hand rehab device. And over the years, that business has grown and become more of a solution, and we've come to represent some other companies as well, such as Exobionics, Technobody, AirTech, and Fessia. So we have a range of companies that we provide the expertise for in the UK. And so we've been supplying all kinds of rehab services from NHS hospitals, small private businesses, individual therapists who have needed certain devices. And over the years, we've seen the change really, you know, what's the phases we've gone through to get to where we are today. And we've gained a great deal of experience from seeing how the adoption has not always gone as planned and where it's been integrated really well. Some excellent examples. And we've taken that experience after meeting Michelle and our other colleagues and said, can we put this together and start from the beginning and make, if you like, the ideal process? And I use the word process because you can buy the gadgets, you can buy the robotics, and you can have a great expertise from your clinicians, but it's how you glue all of that together. And that's what we're working on currently. So hopefully we'll see more of that in the next few months.
Great. Thanks very much for that, Chris. Now, we'll try and make this a discussion because there's sort of three of us in this session. So, you know, feel free, Michelle and Chris, to come in on the questions that I ask. Firstly, can we talk a little bit about exactly how that process of integration works, getting technology and skilled therapy to come together in a really joined up way? How do you do that? Is it happening at the moment, and what kind of impact's that having? If you like, To make this easier, Michelle, if you start firstly, then Chris can come in.
Okay, I'll start when relevant. And I know we're talking the future as part of this presentation, but because I trained such a long ago, it was in the days before we had hoists to transfer patients. For those who are clinicians in the audience, we used to do the Australia to move people up in bed. So it was very staff intensive and with very limited equipment that we had at our fingertips. So things have changed quite considerably over the last, particularly I would say the last 10, 15 years. A range of different pieces of equipment are available. And I've experienced being in situations where we've got a new gadget, a piece of equipment, but if people don't know how to use it, or that wanted that equipment and that used it regularly, there's on a piece of equipment then get left in the corner of the department without being used. So it was not being effective at all. So I've seen areas where equipment is not being used, and what we want to try and achieve is the best mix of clinical experience. I think as clinicians and therapists have a range of experience and tools that we're able to use to be able to provide assessment and identification of patients' impairments, what they're lacking, what they're not able to do, and to make the decision about what treatment is necessary. The technology provides us with a greater range of opportunities to provide therapy in a different way, providing a greater level of intensity, the number of repetitions that are required in order to learn a new motor skill. And as you can see from kind of the QAF video at the beginning, you know, sometimes it takes people to try and help somebody walk, and they're generally only able to walk for short distances. So the time and staff intensive, and we want to try to be able to make best use of the technology that's available in order to provide a much more effective way of working with patients.
Great, thanks, Michelle. Michelle, we're having a few problems with the sound at your end, but I can certainly make out what you're saying, so we'll persevere. I'm not sure there's much you can do about it. If there is, maybe you could have a twiddle, and if not, I think we can make out, and I certainly can make out what you're saying. Keep ahead. Chris, same question to you, really. Integration, how to make it work effectively and how to deliver the benefits from it.
Yeah, certainly. So I think for me, the start point is understanding the motive for investing in technology, and fundamentally, what problem are you trying to solve? And Michelle actually highlighted a few examples. If you go into a service that's investing in tech, and we're not clear on this, then you can't possibly have a good business case. And that business case is the baseline. It's the fundamentals. So understanding the problem, and really this is what technology does in all aspects of life. It solves problems for us. Is it a productivity problem? Is it a communication problem? Is it we need to give more people visibility of their outcomes problem? And once you understand the problem, we can then try and design a solution that fits those needs. And the needs can vary quite differently. Some of the tech that we see now has been, if you like, pioneered in other markets. So if you go, for example, to the German-speaking countries, they're predominantly hospital-centric, where people stay in larger rehab centers, maybe 100 plus beds, and stay for many more months, if not years, have all the rehab there. Whereas in the UK, we tend to leave hospital sooner, are more reliant on community services, accessing outpatient services. You can't always transfer the technology assumptions and business cases literally from that German market to the UK market. So be really clear on what you're trying to achieve right from the beginning for the service provider, whether it's a hospital or it's a small private business owner, is the first part. And then really what you need to do is recognize there is some form of change management. We're not just going to plug a robotic device into the corner, train the staff how to use it, and then expect 3 months later that they've all embraced it and its benefits are clearly being made. There's going to be other things to consider, and the more tech you add to that to create a solution, the more you need to think about this. It could be the environment, the space that you're in. Is it the staff mix of therapy skills? And what we notice is most commonly is the pattern of patient scheduling, for example. The frequency in which the patients are in the gym to use the technology may need to change, which has a knock-on effect. So once you start changing one thing, you have to change others. So a successful integration will ask questions and understand what problem we're trying to solve, and then what needs to change around the technology to make it a success. And consider it as a change management process rather than just buying gadgets.
Thanks, Chris. Sorry, Michelle, did you want to come back in there?
No.
I was going to move on. Maybe you can pick this one up firstly, Chris. How do you go about ensuring that the help and support there is available to therapists so they can make the most of neurotechnology?
This is something else that's changed over time. If we go back 15 years ago, there was a little more, if you like, fear and suspicion of technology. The evidence and research hasn't landed fully. There tends to be quite a long lag between starting research and the results being there. And meanwhile, the tech's already rushed off and developed new robots and new ways of doing things. So it was more difficult, but as time's gone on, and many of the therapists now are much more open to tech. They've come from university and grown up, and they may now be head of department, and there's already a greater acceptance and understanding of the problem solving that I mentioned earlier. So that's made things easier. It goes without saying you need comprehensive training. But one of the, I think the strongest things we can do is to come back and ask questions. I called it a town hall meeting. I did this the first time after implementing some tech in an NHS site, and there was some grumbling that things weren't quite as expected. So we had this town hall meeting and had everybody, the whole department there, and said, right, let's understand what the challenges are. And that's where we came up with the environment, the training, the space allocation, and the patient scheduling. So I think just involving this team right from the beginning in, understanding what those changes might be gives you the greatest opportunity to take the team with you. And because we've now had experience over the last decade, we can normally anticipate what that might look like.
Thanks, Chris. And Michelle, same question. Helping therapists make the most of neurotechnology.
Yeah, I think, as Chris said, it's been a continuous changing environment over the last 10, 15 years. And we know that it takes time to facilitate change, particularly when looking at trying to translate what's been evidenced in research into clinical practice. I think the evidence suggests 15 to 17 years before kind of research is then adopted into routine clinical practice. And I know that initially there was a lot of skepticism within the therapy population when this technology was becoming available, in that they were worried that we were going to be taken over by robots and that there'd be no need for therapists at all. Just strap you into a robot and off you go. But that, as Chris has said, has very much changed recently, as people are a bit more accepting in that we can use technology as a adjunct to our therapy, taking away from our skills, but it's enabling us to use our clinical reasoning in being able to identify what somebody is not able to do, and then selecting the most appropriate treatment for the most appropriate patient in order to be able to generate the best outcome. And it's about adapting, changing, having the opportunity to involve all members of the team. I think you always need to have a few clinical experts who have that area of specialism interest in a particular piece of equipment or in a particular area. Just for example, sort of experience gait analysis, balance rehabilitation, where we have skills in order to understand how the technology works, how we can use it with each individual patient, and which patients are going to get outcome. I think it's having that clinical experience, having the knowledge of how the technology is being used, and so how to use the data that we're able to obtain from the technology in being able to then analyze how somebody is changing or improving. If they're not improving, how can we do that slightly different? Or if we're able to demonstrate improvements, it's being able to then evidence both to the patient to be able to keep them motivated and demonstrate how far they've progressed, but also using that data in order to be able to share with commissioners or for other members of the team that might need information. Certainly gathering of that data, that to help form how to integrate it within a medical environment.
Thanks, Michelle. And Chris, just coming back to you, we've touched on innovation. Could you maybe say a little bit about innovation, the new approaches, and the things that you see now coming over the horizon?
Yeah, certainly. I think if we think of the phases we've experienced over the last decade or so, we are on the brink of another phase, which in some respects is coming faster than people's ability to already access what's available today. But over the last decade, we've seen the implementation of mainly robotics plus computer-assisted tech. However, during that period, one of the big challenges has been how to kind of interface the machines with the hospital systems, make the data more available. There's a lot of potential for assessing patients, doing the testing, and using that data throughout the rehabilitation process, not just for the initial assessment, but ongoing. And I see that's now where we'll see next is a digital revolution within the rehab devices. And you could argue that the hardware, the robotics, yes, they will get replaced with newer, more advanced robotics, but there will be diminishing returns on the hardware. We're kind of where they can get to into some respect. And where the big opportunity will be is how we use the data. So we want to see in resilience a greater emphasis on analysis with patients when they enter the rehab process, but to keep that data with them right the way through, not just in the outpatient center, but when they go home. And for some of them, they will carry that data with them for the rest of their lives. And the potential for them to see what they've achieved from when they left hospital to what they're still doing now, where they may already have fallen out of the stage of, more physiotherapy and occupational therapy to create those early goals, and maybe more focused on their health and fitness and conditioning. Yeah, more rehealth as opposed to just the rehabilitation. And where we will see good improvements now is through that data, how we can keep the data moving with the patient, and empowering Michelle and her team to make more effective therapy plans and be more efficient. A little bit of artificial intelligence may come into that. I know it's a buzzword these days, but we're already seeing how a camera can view somebody from the front and behind. Yeah, using that intelligence to learn what the movements would look like in different directions. So some exciting times ahead, but the big challenge will be how we interface in medical industry with the hospital systems and all the security implications you have with data these days.
Thanks, Chris. And Michelle, new approaches, innovation, what do you see coming down the line that offers reasons for optimism?
I think, as Chris said, looking to the future when patients have maybe finished their period of sort of intense rehabilitation, I think we see some fantastic examples of intense inpatient rehabilitation. Miriam's touched on kind of what they're aiming to do at NRD. There's some great that happening already. I think patients then get discharged home much earlier, as Chris said, than some of our European countries, and then there's this almost gap or a transition for them getting used to being in a community-based setting. And then they might have access to some neuro rehab teams or some outpatient clinics. Again, they get to a phase where actually you can't carry on that inpatient, that rehabilitation for long term. And I think the point where we're able to support people once they're at home and trying to support with their long-term needs in being able to keep monitoring, maintenance, preventing them having to come back into the hospital setting. So in a much better situation in order to stop them for the rest of their life, because so many of the people that we work with are young people who are going to have their disability for the rest of their life. So supporting people in the community and at home, I think, is going to be important.
Thanks,
yeah, if I could just come back, Alastair, on that, because Michelle mentioned patients being at home. If they're in hospital for months, they're at home for years, and the technology hasn't really entered the home, hasn't solved the problems of rehab at home so far. And I think if we consider the outpatient centre as a hub closer to where the patient lives, then that can be the hub which then connects with the home therapy, and developments in digital will enable much more advanced and sophisticated tele-rehab. We're looking at a system called Homing currently, which will look and feel like the therapy the patient did in the outpatient centre with the equipment when they were there, but continuing at home with support from the clinician. Lots of live feedback and data to support and motivate them to keep that going. So that home setting is going to be, and solving the challenges there is critical if we're going to meet the demand that we have.
Sorry, Michelle, please go ahead.
Just adding to what Chris has said, I think the homing device enables us to use tele-rehabilitation to be able to observe how the individuals are at home. It enables us to be able to give them a range of exercises that they can do at home, and them doing their exercise at home and interact with them at that time in order to be able to give them feedback, adjust their program if they're making progress, and also give them access to programs that they can then do at home on a daily basis. But as therapists, we can't be there on a daily basis, but we know to continue to improve or to maintain their abilities, they need to continue pressing. And I think the homing device and teleportation will enable that to happen in the long term.
Thanks, Michelle. Chris touched on challenges, and I think one of the reasons for optimism is our ability to overcome challenges that there are. As we draw towards the end of this discussion, it would be quite interesting to hear your thoughts on what the big challenges are and how optimistic you are about being able to overcome them. I don't know if you want to pick that up firstly, Michelle.
Yes, I think some of the challenges that we face within the community type setting is having the number of people around that we needed to provide that level of intensity of therapy once somebody's come home from hospital. So using some of the technology that's available enables us to overcome so the challenges of not being able to have in a hospital setting, might have a whole range of different therapists and assistants to be able to support somebody walking, for example. So being able to provide the intensity of practice within a community setting and in a safe way. We have to challenge our patients in order to get best out of them, and being able to do that in a safe way is one of the challenges. And I kind of got a question for Chris as well, if that's okay, just because I know a whole range of different pieces of equipment, and the challenge has been trying to determine which of the best pieces of technology in order to use. Of the internet and world therapeutic events we're able to access now, there's a whole range of different equipment that's out, almost to a point where it could be quite bewildering in how to select the most appropriate piece of equipment, and often very expensive. So how to decide really what's the most suitable pieces of equipment is quite a challenge. So maybe my question, Chris, would be, what is the significant piece of innovation or innovative technology that is changing current practice?
Well, given that we've had various robotics on the market now for a number of years, and we've got some really good, it's evolved from maybe more emphasis on exoskeletons now to more end effectors. Obviously, we use the gait trainer Lexo, which is an example. What this device and other applications really benefit from is dynamic bodyweight support. And it might feel a bit specific to talk about that area, but it does make a big difference right across the rehab gym, whether it's within the gait trainer or whether it's learning to sit to stand or regaining balance. The sophistication of these devices now are so good that you can control how much body weight support you want to give somebody with a button like a TV remote control. And it means that it can be applied, as I said, very dynamically. So it could be to learn to fall over safely, to how to climb back up off the floor, how to get to your phone to call for help. Or in the example of gait training, conventional gait training, you've seen it with parallel bars where people are supporting themselves with their arms and walking only, maybe 30 steps in a session. With the body weight support, you can learn to take the weight through your legs and to balance better and reduce the amount of support that you're giving people as they get stronger. What do you think, Michelle? Do you feel that kind of applies widely enough across the gym to be like a critical, element that you would need?
Yeah, certainly. I think from the days where you had to have therapists in order to be able to study, to be able to take a few steps, that's changing, and having access to the body weight support harness means that we're able to do a much wider range of activities in a much more functional setting. So for example, the Lexo enables us to be able to adjust the amount of support somebody needs, making them do more work, giving them the intensity of the practice, taking steps over sort of a longer period of time. So if somebody's able to use it for half the number of steps that they're able to do, much greater than somebody working with 3 therapists with the support. And I think the example of balance that you've given, something that particularly when we're training balance rehabilitation, is that patients get so used to using their arms for their balance that they're using their legs, and it's their legs that they need to be able to balance, and we want to reduce the reliance on them using their arms in order to support themselves up against gravity and stop themselves from falling. So use that body weight support enable them to be able to practice their reactive balance activities in a safe way. That means that their balance is less likely to fall when they're walking in the community. So gait and balance training is something that I see this having huge benefits.
Well, we could give you another 2 hours of innovations if.
I sense that you could, Chris and Michelle, but unfortunately we don't have the next 2 hours. But I do think that this has been such a fascinating discussion. I'm sure we'd like to find that time in the future to have a discussion about some of the specific themes we've covered here. So can I just thank you, Michelle and Chris, for joining us today? It's been a great discussion. And I'm sure as that discussion is shared and networked, there'll be a lot more questions and issues that maybe we'd like to ask you to address if you've got the time. So on behalf of our Times today, thanks very much for joining us and sharing your thoughts.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we move on to our final session and our final speakers. Definitely last but not least, we're joined now by Nicola Cage from Maggie Sargent and Associates in Community Case Management Services, and Eki Poppet, who's Ops Director and Registered Manager at Biz Services. So welcome, Nicola. Welcome, Eki. And we're going to talk about people and talent, which sits right at the heart of the delivery of so many services that are crucial to the neuro rehab community. But before they do that, as you've seen with all the other panelists, Nicola and Eki, I'm going to ask you just to say a few words about yourself, your organisation, your areas of specific interest, and then we'll maybe go on to a few questions. Nicola, if I could start with you, please.
Good afternoon, Alastair. Hello, everyone. I'm Nicola, and I've been involved in brain injury for over 20 years. I first met Maggie Sargent in her capacity as an expert witness. And I worked with one client as a team leader for several years, and then was able to access a case management pathway. And I've been a case manager at Community Case Management for 13 years with Maggie as my supervisor, which has been a lot of learning for me. My particular interests are, in equal measure, making life good again for our clients, for which you need exceptional teams. And I'm also passionate about developing people and creating unique career pathways, not dissimilar to the one that I was able to follow. I'm in good company with Eki. So.
Fantastic. Thanks for that introduction, Nicola. And Eki.
Afternoon, everyone, and thank you to NR Times for holding such an amazing event. I'm Eki Poppet. I'm Operations Director and Registered Manager for the Biz. I've been with the Biz for 14 years now, and I started off as a cognitive rehab assistant, supporting people in the community with brain injury, and I have worked myself up and now I'm registered manager. The Biz are the UK leading providers of cognitive rehabilitation and brain injury support services for the community. And we really pride ourselves on raising the standards for cognitive rehabilitation and really looking at the kind of evidence that's required, especially for legal cases. So a lot of our referrals are through case managers and solicitors, looking for that higher level observation and record keeping. And I think my particular interest has always been around independent living assessments and trials. A lot of people were living in the community want to live independently with a brain injury, and it's always, I think, one of the biggest challenges of how you can do that. So we do a lot of work with case managers and solicitors about our LINK program, which is a 12-week intensive living program that you can do, and we use a triphasic approach to really evidence long-term needs and recommendations. So that's one of our biggest specialisms, and I'm really pleased to actually announce that we've actually started doing a research project as well, looking at the efficacy of cognitive rehabilitation in the community. So a lot going on in the biz world.
Great, thank you, Eki. So we're going to talk about people and talent, and I'll start with the question that I hope isn't negative and leads to, a positive discussion. So talent and shortages of talent, or the right kind of talent, is that holding back progress? And if so, how are you dealing with that? And how does the community deal with it? I'll come to you first, Nicola, and then ask Eki for her thoughts.
Yes, it's such a good question, and it's always something that we have to consider. Do we have enough people? Can we really staff teams as well as we would like? The answer is we're doing okay, but I think that might be the geography based, in the home counties. We've got a lot of people around, and we can draw creatively from universities that we have locally. But in different parts of the country, I think that might be a different story. So I think thinking outside the box, to use one of Mike's terms earlier, is something that we're probably, and I imagine, Eki, you're doing something similar, but having to do creative thinking, having to come up with some innovative adverts. We're partnering with universities, partnering with colleges to access young people and people who may be looking to have a career change later in life, to find people who are willing and interested in coming into the world of brain injury rehabilitation and supporting people in the community.
We'll maybe come back to some of that innovation, Nicola. Eki, how are you finding things in terms of talent
I think
attraction?
talent is such an interesting word, because I think everyone will see talent differently, and I think it's multifaceted actually for us, because for us, our cognitive rehab assistants, the minimum that's required is a psychology degree, and they have some relevant experience, but actually talent goes beyond just academic knowledge and experience. It's actually about job knowledge transfer and application. And I think that's where we find it quite tricky, is sometimes we have the application or the applicants coming with the minimum requirement, but it's that interpersonal skills, especially in the community, that one-to-one cultural competency, the problem-solving skills, the ability to be actually resistance as well in terms of resilience, but also like boundaries. How do you uphold boundaries one-to-one in a community when you're only 21, 22, and you don't have necessarily those life skills that you haven't developed yet. So we find that really tricky in terms of actually getting the right people in. But I agree with Nicola, you do have to think creatively, and we've done something similar in terms of working with universities, and we actually have placement opportunities at the biz now as well, just because you have that continuity with a placement, you have the year commitment, and that's also another thing is the commitment drive of things. No one wants to be in a job longer than 6 months. But we know working with vulnerable people, you need that consistency and continuity. So again, for us, it's about making sure that we are getting the right people in, but it's looking at assessing those interpersonal skills from the onset for us. So yeah.
I'm going to stick with you, Eki, and just ask, you talked about universities. Does it need to start at a much earlier age? I see a lot of industry sector bodies getting STEM education into primary schools even. Is there a big job to be done to make a career in neuro rehab much more attractive and much more of an obvious choice?
Absolutely. I think it can go much wider than we're already doing right now, but I just think there's a lack of awareness around community work as well. I think there's a lot of knowledge around neuro rehabilitation in terms of psychology, AP pathways, or clinical routes, but actually like the therapy routes or the community work, I just think there's a lack of knowledge around that. I think everyone just goes down the clinical route. So again, yeah, I think there's a lot more scope for education around from an early age of actually what the different roles in neuro rehab entail. And it's not just I suppose the conventional ones, like the psychologist. So absolutely. But I think I know back in the day when I, used to have parents come in and tell, I don't know what they call them, but, you used to have like parents coming and tell them about their jobs, but actually having more of that, I think that's been lost. Actually teaching children about different career pathways and actually having those open discussions, I think that would be fantastic.
Nicola?
Yeah, bring your parent to
yes
school day.
Yeah.
I bring my nephews to work quite often, and they're very knowledgeable. But it is, I suppose, it's getting people out more. With some of the teams that we have, it's making sure clients are out and about, and people are sharing by word of mouth what they do and how they attain job satisfaction, and the things that they might be working towards. Maybe some of the way I would sort of describe it in some of the teams, we have what I would consider kind of grid support workers, so career therapeutic workers, whether they're rehabilitation assistants or buddies, whatever word we're using. And then you can have these sort of OT students and physio students rotating off the ends, who might be with you for a year or two, either as part of their course or earning money during their degree. And what's great about that is that trickles back to their lecturers, and we get to go and do little talks in the university in Brooks and in one in Birmingham. And I think it's just trying to spread the word, isn't it? It's us, instead of looking inwards, looking outwards. And maybe we need a blockbuster movie, another blockbuster movie on supporting people. Was the one that was The Upside, the gentleman who was quadriplegic. It was a really good film, wasn't it? It really got people thinking about whether they could work with somebody in a different way. And I think I think it could be interesting.
Yeah, that's good. I think even social media, if I'll be honest with you, I think there's a lot of work that can be done on social media. And I know a lot of our clients are actually now becoming a lot more confident to tell their stories on social media, or become more, they're more technology equipped than I am, but they actually use that as an opportunity to share their stories and actually connect to a wider network. So again, I think there's a lot more that can be done from the social media aspect as well, raising awareness.
Absolutely.
And just moving on to teams and how you build teams. Thoughts on how you develop multifaceted teams that are in a position not just to meet patient and client demand, but to anticipate it and build models and developments for the future. So building teams. Nicola, do you want to kick off?
Yeah, multifaceted teams is so elastic, isn't it? You need, like I said about the grid, you're going to need some people who are staying there a good long time on the team. Maybe people who are really rooted in that area, in that geography, who know the area where your client's living. But you also need other people who are coming and going, because then you're also practicing the relationship and getting people used to change, whether it's established team members or your client, that you're used to building relationships. So how you do that, I think, is looking at people's skills and their passions. And also one of the things that we've tried to do, and I'm sure Ecky's doing the same, is share support workers, therapeutic workers over different clients, so that you're sharing skills, you're sharing experiences. And obviously that comes with challenges, but I think at the level that Ecky and I are working, it's really dynamic management, supervision, so that people have really strong boundaries, but are bringing the best of themselves to one team and then maybe sharing it with another.
Yeah, I echo exactly what you're saying, Nicole. And I think it is also about having those open, transparent conversations constantly with team members about what is their skills, what are they passionate about. And we do a lot of work around one-to-one support around that as well. And Natalie, the director, she's excellent. So I could actually say all of our management team at the Biz have progressed from cognitive rehab assistants. So all have at some point done the grassroots, but have somewhat we've seen the skills or the potential and the progress. So I think that's really important, to see that progression within a workplace, and knowing that actually my skills are being valued or seen, and then I have a pathway to do that. So I think it's having those open conversations, and when you do see the potential, acting on it very quick.
Yeah, and recognition, I think, is so important, and helping people to continue to learn. Like you just said, whether they're progressing their own pathway, or they're seeing their colleague being helped. Because some people Very happy because maybe they have a busy life with their families and small children, but they would think, oh, actually, in a couple of years, I'd like that opportunity too. But if they see it happening, the commitment, I believe we're extremely fortunate in our line of work because people who come into this work, if we can attract them in, actually will give a huge amount of themselves. And obviously with emotional distance regulation and all of that, but and recognizing them for the work that they're doing and making a difference. And I think a lot of people want that in their work.
It's interesting. I think particularly with the generation we're seeing now coming through into the workplace, they do want to have a sense of mission. And they want to know that the work that they do will deliver social value, I think. I think that's much more so the case than probably any time in the past.
Yep.
I don't know. I probably would differ. I think it depends. I think a lot of the candidates that we get, they are on a particular journey and it is down the clinical route sometimes. So sometimes they can see biz or this neuro rehab as a bit of a stepping stone. So sometimes it can be seen as not like the commitment Nicole was talking about, is that they can just see this as, okay, I'm here for a pit stop and I'm going to go and do bigger things or better things. So again, I think it's a different mindset from everybody. But I see a big shift in that kind of wanting to fast track progression a lot. And I think there's that. And I think it is, again, the generation of seeing social influencers on social media making money very quickly and thinking, oh, I can get, rich quite quickly. But actually, it's about working hard and actually getting to know your clients. It's a different, I think, a different field completely. So I think, I would agree and disagree.
Yeah, I think you touched on there are no shortcuts to experience, and everything's so easily available right now, so accessible. And of course, you kind of, I'm sure, you'll dial into knowing who's going to stay and who's probably got one foot lightly touching. And of course, they will have brought a raft of experience and lots of good energy, but it's a different quality in the relationship. And in some of the teams that we look after, we'll have support workers who are there 10, 20 years, working really well, doing amazing work, tracking their clients, growing up together. But the challenge then is to keep that fresh and for it not to become the fur-lined rut, where people don't grow and grow for themselves. And when we're talking about trying to make people's lives good again, and the support teams, therapeutic workers are role modeling that either in their relationships. So then it's keeping that energy up.
I suppose what you're both underlining is this: attracting and keeping talent is a process, not an event. You've got to work at it day after day, week after week, month after month. Hey, we've talked quite a bit about technology throughout the discussions we've had today. Is that playing a part in your thinking about how you develop the capacity required to meet client demand?
I think I've seen the use of technology and the use of actually AI on our application forms. It's been very interesting how that has been used and how we have to also be mindful that if our people are using AI and not actually completing our application form or cover letter in their own words, how are they going to then deliver the support that we require, or in an interview, how are they then going to be differing in their approach? So we've seen technology in that phase being used a lot more readily, and it's very, very challenging because you see they have the good skills, they have good relevant experience, but then they're using AI to mask their own skills and ability. And how do you use it effectively? It's not saying that we can't avoid it, but it's how we then incorporate it, make it that we can manage it. So that's a big one for us, AI.
Yeah, I agree. I was like, seen that written before.
Yeah, exactly.
But you can't kid a kidder, can you? So I think when you've been doing the work for a long time, You can also see when people are very genuine. And yeah, I think it's important.
So, Nicola, I'm moving quickly on from technology.
Yes.
Tell us your thoughts on the challenges, but particularly the opportunities when it comes to recruiting and developing that next generation of practitioners and those that will support the neuro rehab community.
So hugely passionate about it because I love it so much. So for me, talking to clients about it's okay to have a great physio student or OT student working with you for a couple of years because you're training the next generation of physios and OTs and you're luring them into neuro and away from all the other disciplines. So I love that. I think also ensuring that there's lots of interesting things going on and to do, and talking to people, helping them with other skills, offering counselling training, which might not be directly involved in their work, but of course they're going to be working on their listening skills, offering reflective practice, really good space together with neuropsychologists where we can talk about the work and the practice, and elevating the role of the support worker, the rehab assistant, the whichever word you're going to use, because if you say carer, that would get my back up quite strongly, because that is not the work that we're doing, and that is also not helping the person who's going through the long journey of rehabilitation and continuing daily to struggle. So for me, it's about this lovely synergy, and if you can explain it to people, you can hook them. This synergy between they're piggybacking on your brain for some of the things that they need, but when they can do it, you magically step back and they can do it themselves, and they have the win and the achievement, and you've been a teamwork and you've collaborated. But elevating that role and people seeing the worth in that and feeling the magic, because it is really magical, because Eki and I have both done it, so we know. And you've made a difference and you've watched that play out. So if we can get in front of people and explain to them, then they'll be hooked.
Fantastic, Nicola. Eki, your thoughts on the challenges and the opportunities?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges is what Nicole said there, is that just seeing it as caring, or it's more than just personal care. A lot of people just see rehabilitation, they think physical. They don't see the work that Nicole just mentioned, the actual kind of interdependence work that you do, multidisciplinary work, that kind of building a rapport with someone one-to-one in their own home is special, and actually a privilege. I see, and I think people take that for granted. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges, getting that message across of actually what neuro rehab actually is. So again, like you said, Alastair, I think going back to much earlier and instilling that would be great. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges at the moment. And I think also, just from the placement idea, is, going back to, just the modules on these degrees as well that I want to. I'm very passionate about this. I don't feel like there's enough work done on the degrees around neuro rehabilitation or brain injury. Even within schools, we know how many teachers are struggling out there who are not equipped with the knowledge of how to support children with a brain injury. So again, I think that's one of the biggest challenges as well, is not enough education for the people actually doing the work. So again, I think that's one of the biggest challenges. And I think for me, I think I don't know if you find this as well, Nicole, but the people that come in to do this work are very young. They're still learning, and I think there's such an expectation on role modeling. There's a lot of session of modeling appropriate behaviors, but some of them haven't had that experience. So a lot of them wanting to do independent living work, and when they haven't even paid bills or lived independently. So again, how are we expecting the support teams to be able to do that if they don't have that experience? So it's actually we have a duty of care to make sure that we are putting the right people in there. They are competent people. So that goes back to the talent question. It's not just about seeing a degree on a paper and some experience. Can they actually apply it? And I think that's where we have a duty of care to our clients. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges. It's not one size fits all. Every client needs something different, and making sure that we are meeting that is very tricky, but rewarding. I love it when we get it right.
Eki, Nicola, thank you so much for sharing your experience with us. It's been a pleasure to listen to you speak so passionately about something that is so important both to the community and obviously to both of you. So thanks very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
So Nicola and Eki were our final speakers today. I hope for everybody watching you've enjoyed this NR Times live event. I'd like to say a big thank you on behalf of NR Times to our sponsors QEF. Obviously, I would like to thank our fabulous panelists for giving up their time so willingly and talking so frankly about their experience and their insight as well. And I'd like to thank our audience. All those of you that are watching, please, when this content and the clips from today and the entire session is posted on YouTube and on the NR Times site, please share it as widely as possible. It deserves to get seen by as many people as possible. And for those of you that asked questions that I wasn't able to get to, we'll pass those on to the team at NR Times and they'll have a discussion with our panelists and hopefully we'll get some answers posted on the NR Times site imminently. So thank you once again to all of our panelists. I should say as we draw the session today to a conclusion that the work of NR Times is made possible by our members, and NR Times is absolutely focused on sharing the rehab experience and reaching out to the rehab community, giving neuro rehab a really loud and influential voice, building relationships, referrals, helping to recruit, going back to our last session there. And on behalf of NR Times, I'd like to express our appreciation for all the support we get from the community, from our members, and all those organisations that contribute to the work of NR Times. So I'd encourage you to talk to the team at NR Times. If you'd like to talk to them about how you can work together with them and contribute to the work that they do, then please contact them through the NR Times website. All the contact details are there. So that represents the conclusion of our event today. There'll be more events coming down the line. Thanks once again to everybody for watching and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.